what a beautiful weather and what a beautiful day at Robert Thirsk High School.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Ladies Hour exclusive podcast. We are your favorite hosts, Chelsea and Raha. And this episode is for all you literature critiques and analyzers out there, as well as you feminists. Or maybe you're a traditionalist and want to listen to go argue our points on social media. No matter who you are, we hope you gain some depth and understanding to shape the ideology and values you follow. Now, vámonos. Now, anyways, on today's episode, we have a famous anthropologist, Fiza Labebe, to help us understand the human condition and how our pieces of literature today has many underlying themes. Hello, Fiza. How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good too, especially well now that you're here.
In today's session, we'll be talking about the science fiction story When It Changed by Joanna Russ. The short story gives us an insight on a planet known as Walloway that is inhabited by women only. On the planet, the women have reorganized and have adapted to their environment without the presence of men. The first question that may arise for many is that, well, how do they reproduce and pass on genetic information to the future generations without the presence of men? As it turns out, the women were able to reproduce by fusing the ova in order to have offspring and also participate in the same-sex marriage. Following the narrator, Janet and her partner, Katie, have children together through the fusion of the ova and are later surprised to see when male astronauts visit their planet. Upon meeting the four men, Janet is immediately taken aback by their physical size, whereas she then says, "They are bigger than we are." Just as surprised when the men find out about their absence a while away, they start to talk about their return and seem to be speaking in a tone that implies that their return will mean rescuing the women. They find it surprising that women don't seem to find situations difficult without men. One of the men insults them further by stating that Katie would benefit from the introduction of a male into their society, as the astronaut views Katie as the woman in the marriage between herself and Janet.
What is that?
Oh my god. What are the themes and exploration in What It Changed? Oh my god. Well, I'm so glad you asked. One of the key themes of When It's Changed is the exploration of gender roles and expectations. See, Russ, the author, presents a world in which women are the only gender, and as a result, the societal norms and expectations have evolved to reflect this. Women are the leaders, warriors, homesteads, cooks, breadwinners of Walloway, and men are a distant memory. This allows Russ to explore ways in which gender roles are constructed and how they shape society. Another important theme is the idea of change and adaptation. Despite the catastrophic event that wiped out all the men, the women of Walloway have managed to create a new society, new technologies, keep on giving birth, continuing generation after generation. And they have also developed new social structures and ways of living to accommodate their unique situation. The story suggests that change is not only possible, but is necessary for survival. Additionally, When It Changed explores the idea of identity and belonging. Janet, the protagonist, is presented as someone who is torn between her loyalty to her people and her attraction to the male explorers who arrive on Walloway. She struggles to reconcile her feelings with a sense of duty to her own community. This theme highlights the way in which identity and belonging can be complicated and how difficult it can be to navigate contending loyalties. Overall, When It Changed is a thought-provoking exploration of gender, society, and the importance of adaptability. It raises important questions about nature of gender roles, the possibility of societal changes, and the complexities of identities and belonging. Let's continue over on to our podcast station.
What are your main thoughts going forward onto this topic, Fiza?
Well, first let's start off with the men in the short story. The astronauts come off when they come off their spaceship are pretty egoistical, right? They think they know what's best. The male society is concerned that Wildway is unnatural and cannot survive from our without the presence of males. The males insist that the females actually need them for survival, and both the male and female society would benefit from being interlinked. Although an all-female society may seem unnatural, I can claim that the female society has become accustomed to the roles of the man and have integrated that into their society. And one example of this in actually real life is Umoja, Kenya, where there are actually no men present in their village at all, and it's literally all just females, and female run, they harvest, and they do all the roles that men would typically do, but and their village is thriving. The women have been able to fill the gaps in which they need, and they don't need any men anymore. And for some reasons, it's very confusing to the men in the coming off that spaceship.
Wow, that's an interesting idea for sure. So what I get is that the men are just invalidating their way of life, even though they've lived this way for 30 generations. I'm going to bring up something similar to what you're saying. The men say to the woman that sexual equality has been reestablished on Earth. Both the woman and the men speak of what it means to be unnatural. What do you think unnatural means in this plot?
That's a very good question, right? So let's take some context for that conversation that you're referring to. Katie tells the males that she and Janet are married. The male responds with a good economic arrangement for working and taking care of children. He says this because he thinks that this society is so unnatural and needs the presence of the males. When he says economic arrangement, it's an insult towards a woman. He's saying that their bond of marriage is not actually a bond of love, feelings, emotion, compassion, till death do us part, but he's like just saying that it's to share the workload that men would usually be aware of. He's demeaning homosexuality as a whole and saying that same-sex relationships cannot work in a society and overall enhance that society. And this is where we find the main contention of the story, right? It's the interaction between the male astronauts and the woman a while away. And one astronaut commented that the plague that occurred years past was a great tragedy. To this, Janet pauses, not quite understanding. The man produces a clear smile that tells you something is being hidden, and going on to speak so condescendingly about the woman, right? And Janet doesn't take it well, and she thinks that he's invalidating them, and she even goes as to say that he's calling them invalids, right? But the astronaut is assuring them that they're missing a very content part of society that they need, right? And it's just showing that Katie would benefit from the introduction of males, to which she gets enraged that she is literally about to kill him, right? It's so uncharacteristic of her, because she really wouldn't harm anybody. And then she reaches for Janet's rifle and fires it, but she misses her shot because Janet stops her too. But in this situation, would you think her anger is completely justified?
Honestly, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. So there is nothing that the women need from men, is what they think, right? 30 generations without men, do they really need a man in their life? And the one question that the astronaut is really bouncing around but they never come to terms with is, who is the man in this relationship? And it comes to the point, right, where it's it comes to her main point. It is the implicit nature of the patriarchy of sexism that undercuts the role of women. Feminism can never truly succeed until society unless society either makes a clear distinction between men and women, or they completely take that distinction away and say that there is no distinction in men or women.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Russ wrote this in 1972. So it's pretty ahead of its time, I feel like. Because it's a time where women had already won the right to vote, but they were still facing many instances of sexism wherever they went. There were implicit unequal pay at the workplace, gender expectations in the marriage and family, etc. I believe Russ wrote this in response to these issues. Instead of focusing on some grand narrative that featured reverse patriarchy or strong female people characters, she chose a nuanced approach, kind of that featured more relatable, almost genderless characters. And in doing so, she gave a more honest take on how women felt in a patriarchal society, by showing how the entirely self-sufficient woman on Walloway felt in response to four men. like when gender roles are introduced once again to the women who have lived like generations without, these gender roles, they feel like, uneasy and angered. And this perhaps mirrors the feelings of women at the time and, perhaps even today. This being the feeling of subjected to certain gender norms, roles, and stereotypes, despite the notion that men and women should be equal and that these roles should not exist.
Hey there! Are you ready to take a stand for gender equality? Well, it's time to lace up your sneakers and join the feminist movement with Nikki. At Nikki, we believe that everyone deserves the same opportunities regardless of their gender. That's why we're proud to support the feminist movement and all those who fight for gender equality. Whether you're running a marathon, hitting the gym, or just walking down the street, you can show your support for feminism with Nikki. Our products are designed to empower women and break down the stereotypical barriers that hold them back. And let's be real, being a feminist is tough work. It takes courage, strength, and determination to stand up for what's right. But with Nikki on your side, you can be sure that you're never alone in the fight. So whether you're a seasoned athlete or just starting out, join the feminist movement with Nikki. Together we create a world where everyone has the same opportunities regardless of their gender.
So speaking of feminism, I feel like I can really see the impacts of feminists and women's rights activists throughout the world. Even countries like China, known for their relative lack of political activism and demonstrations, especially from women, because of the historical, cultural, and social oppression from the gender stereotypes that expect women to be submissive, obedient, and kind of conform to traditional norms. Someone who has especially seen the impact of feminism in the evolution of social media communication and in the process of globalization is my mother. So in the year 1995, when my mother was 18, one of her friends had excitedly called her saying to turn on the TV. And when she did, she witnessed what could be considered one of the most progressive blueprints ever for, advancing women's rights. And this was the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the first global policy framework to confirm gender mainstreaming as a key strategy for gender equality. What really elevated its significance is that it called on governments and other platforms to apply to all policies and programs. The Beijing Platform for Action from the Fourth World Conference on Women in the UN remains one of the strongest commitments to women's human rights and has brought considerable successes in securing women's political, social, and economic rights. And for my mother and many others, it was also the first time she had seen action done to, the constant rigid gender roles, especially prevalent in Asian countries. For me personally, I think one of the biggest impacts feminism made for me is that it challenges gender stereotypes and promotes women's empowerment. For years, women in China learned to be as submissive and obedient as possible, to bear sons for their husbands when asked and not complain about everything. But now, especially this generation of young women in China, they have taken a step forward in independence, and that they realize the value in themselves and are no longer bound by gender stereotypes that were so strong in previous generations. They chose to not have children unless they wanted to, and to not settle down with a husband even if they turned the ripe age of 30. And because of this, the government has started a nickname for these women called leftover woman, or Shen, which kind of means like leftover woman, and it's a pretty horrid nickname, and they kind of do it in hopes to like inspire these like independent and happy women to settle down and find a husband as quickly as possible. This is kind of ironic actually, because like the so-called leftover women are happy, and they're not in fact like leftovers. It's actually kind of the men, especially in rural areas, that are left over instead, because of the one-child policy in China and the killing of so many unwanted baby girls, and so it leads to like a high percentage of male to female ratio. Another impact it has made on me, or Asian females in general, is that it addresses issues specific to Asian females, such as fetishization of Asian women, discrimination, racism, and gender-based violences. I feel really proud that feminist activists work to raise awareness about these issues and to advocate for policies and programs that address them.
So much for sharing. Well, unfortunately, in some areas of the world, we seem to be moving back in time rights and freedoms. Currently around the world, we have places like Iran and Afghanistan where women are literally fighting to death for basic human rights, such as the right to education, or being given the choice to wear whatever it is they please to wear. After the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in September, an Iranian woman who was killed under the hands of the Islamic regime for allegedly breaking the country's strict hijab rules, a revolution broke out. The revolution is still ongoing, although you do not see the media talking about it enough. As of today, thousands of men and women have been arrested or brutally being raped, assaulted, and given the death sentence for fighting for basic rights. As an Iranian woman who traveled to Iran during the summer, I refused to wear the hijab whenever I went out. I was warned by my family and friends that I'm going to get myself in trouble for not following the regulations, but I honestly couldn't care less.
That's really brave.
And the thing with Iran is that every mall you go to, or even when you're walking out in the open, you have what is called the morality police, and they travel in vans, and if they see you not covered up properly, they will arrest you. And during my time there, I was chased by them 3 times. I was never caught, and I don't think I want to know what would have happened if I did get caught. I always thought that it was funny that I was able to outrun them until I saw them rape and kill the people they arrested. As an Iranian woman who is living on the other side of the world, I feel ashamed having to explain to my foreign friends that we are not at war with another country, but that we are at war killing our own unarmed citizens. The Islamic regime has been suppressing women for 45 years now. There are so many talented and intelligent women in Iran studying medicine and mathematics who have the potential of becoming something big, but it is the regime who thinks that these women are not good enough and have no potential due to their sex. Even in the short story, we can perceive a similar situation occur throughout the interaction between Janet, Katie, and the male astronauts. When they originally learn about the absence of men on the planet, the men assume a rescue mode. They have difficulty believing that the women are happy on a single-gender planet, even though the story highlights the women that have lived there for hundreds of years have been successful at doing so without the intervention of men. In fact, the women there even go through rites of passage usually meant for men on Earth. Janet mentions that her daughter will soon disappear for weeks on end, to come back grimy and proud, having knifed her first cougar or shot her first bear. With only one gender, there were no longer any genders.
Chelsea and Raha created many good connections, and I would like to offer one of my own from my actual personal life as well, similar to both of them. So, I come from Pakistan, and unlike what Raha and Chelsea mentioned, I feel like mine is more of a cultural thing, and it's not really a law or regulation, it's more of a cultural thing. So basically in Pakistan and India, and many other parts of the world that aren't, as progressive as the United States and Canada, the women are generally less than men in the household. The men make the decisions, and the women just follow along very obediently. But in my household growing up, my mom was the leader of the household. So in a sense, I think I lived in a matriarchy in my household, similar to the woman mentioned in the story. My mom was in charge of all the finances. The moment my dad got his paycheck, it would go right into my mom's hand. My dad couldn't buy anything unless my mom said yes, and just going on forward and forward. And I think when I went up and I grew up to school and I saw all of the other families, I was kind of amazed, that the opposite actually occurs, and I just thought everyone else had their mom as leader of the household. But then one time when I went back to Pakistan, I saw how different my cousins lived, how the moms just cleaned up the kitchen, and how we never got to eat until the males got to eat first. And that's something I was never really sure of. So relating back to the story, I think I was, that matriarchy all-female planet, and then those astronauts came, and it was really an awakening moment for me, and it really got me to pursue more, feminist activism movements, and really look into what is actually happening in the world, because I feel like in my personal life, it was really hard for me to connect with people who had these issues when I never grew up in an environment similar to that. And it was a very, breathtaking and awakening moment. So when I hear you and Chelsea and Raha's stories, I really start to think that there are actually people in the world, people who I know really close to me, who actually go through these things that I never thought they would go through.
Credits!